I remember the night so vividly that it feels more like a series of stinging photographs than a linear memory. Tara and I had just returned from an upscale Italian restaurant, celebrating what was supposed to be a momentous occasion, our 5th wedding anniversary. The evening shimmered with promise. We had spent weeks planning it, reserving a table at a romantic spot, picking out special outfits, and dedicating ourselves to spending time together without interruption. As we arrived home, I looked at Tara's warm, contented face and truly felt that all those small fissures that had appeared in our relationship over the past few months might finally be healing. We walked into the living room, hand in hand, my mind brimming with hope. Then came the text from my best friend, Ethan. In a casual, almost flippant tone, he asked if he could swing by to hang out for a bit. I felt a curious jolt of annoyance, but before I could suggest we politely decline, Tara had already tapped a quick, enthusiastic reply. Sure, come on over. That one decision, that single acceptance, would unravel so much more than I ever anticipated. I had stepped onto a road toward ruin. Ethan wasn't just some casual buddy, he was the person who'd been my closest confidant for over a decade. We met during freshman orientation at college, bonding over late-night pizza runs and mutual frustration with a notoriously difficult philosophy course. Over the years, I had grown to trust him so deeply that I never questioned his intentions. He was the best man at my wedding, the guy who coaxed me out of my shell whenever I was feeling down. The idea that he could disrupt my life had never once crossed my mind. Even when Tara showed signs of annoyance at how often Ethan would drop by unannounced, I always defended him. He's like a brother, I would say, brushing aside her concerns. My wife and I had weathered a few storms, from job losses to health scares, but none so directly involving someone I considered family. That's why, on that anniversary night, I told myself I was being paranoid for feeling unsettled. Maybe I'd had too much wine with dinner. Tara seemed genuinely happy to see Ethan, but there was something off in the air, a flicker of tension I couldn't define, lingering beneath the surface. I sensed it. Ethan arrived carrying a bottle of wine, which he promptly opened as if continuing our anniversary celebration. Although we'd already said our goodnights at the restaurant, Tara didn't seem to mind in the slightest. In fact, she smiled wider than I'd seen in months and eagerly poured 3 glasses. Normally, I'd have been grateful for his generosity, but something twisted in my gut. We'd just come back from a carefully planned evening meant for us as a couple, yet here we were, letting Ethan insert himself into the most intimate hours of our night. Still, I forced a smile. We lounged in the living room, the TV muted in the background, while Ethan cracked jokes about our college days. Tara leaned forward, hanging on his every word. She laughed in a way I hadn't heard in forever. It was, but it felt exclusive, like an inside joke I wasn't part of. My annoyance grew with each passing minute. Around midnight, when my eyes grew heavy and I suggested calling it a night, Ethan looked at Tara, not me, and asked if she wanted him to leave. She paused, then shook her head with a laugh. No, it's fine, she said. I turned in soon after, leaving them in the living room. I told myself it was just exhaustion and that I trusted both of them. But sleep was elusive. I couldn't ignore the hushed murmurs and occasional bursts of laughter drifting down the hallway. At one point, I even thought I heard Tara's voice soften, as though comforting someone. A strange pang of jealousy twisted inside me, a feeling I hadn't experienced in years. Eventually, I dozed off around 2 in the morning, but when I woke up an hour later, the living room light was still on. The digital clock on my bedside table blinked 3:05 a.m. My best friend and my wife were still talking. I padded out to find them leaning in close, glasses empty, both of them startled by my appearance. Tara mumbled something about how they'd lost track of time. Ethan nodded, looking uncharacteristically sheepish. I didn't yell or make a scene, I just stared. We were just talking, Tara insisted, eyes red from either wine or tears, maybe both. I said nothing, turned around, and trudged back to bed. The entire situation felt like an intrusion into my marriage, and my heart pounded with doubt. In the days that followed, I struggled to articulate my feelings. Whenever I brought up that late-night conversation, Tara brushed off my concerns, insisting it was just harmless chatter between friends. She seemed irritated by my growing suspicion, as if I were the one committing some offense by doubting her loyalty. Ethan, for his part, acted like nothing unusual had happened. He texted me memes, asked about weekend plans, and even invited me out for our usual morning runs. I forced myself to keep up appearances, but internally, I was boiling. At home, I found myself scrutinizing Tara's every move, where she placed her phone, whom she was texting, how quickly she replied. This was uncharted territory for me, a nauseating blend of paranoia and heartbreak. I could feel a fracture forming between us, one that had me desperately wanting answers, yet terrified to discover them. Late one evening, I finally gathered the courage to confront her directly. I asked if she felt something was missing in our marriage, if Ethan was somehow filling a void I couldn't. She glared at me with a mixture of exasperation and pity. "Don't be ridiculous," she snapped, walking away, leaving me standing there alone. The turning point arrived on a Sunday afternoon. I was in the garage, tinkering with an old radio, when I overheard Tara on a phone call. Her voice was hushed, tense, and I caught snatches of phrases like soul connection and "we're meant to find each other in every lifetime." My heart hammered, and I inched closer to the door. Was she talking to Ethan? The possibility ignited a surge of fury that clenched my throat. After a few moments, she hung up. My entire body was shaking. I confronted her immediately, demanding to know who she'd been speaking to. She went pale but quickly recovered, insisting it was a friend from work who believed in reincarnation, some silly conversation I'd misinterpreted. I wanted to believe her, but the way she avoided my eyes told a different story. Later that night, I grabbed her phone while she was in the shower, something I'd never done before. My hands trembled as I scrolled through her messages. Most were mundane, but then I found Ethan's name. I opened the thread and saw references to past lives, hints at a deeper bond than just friendship. That was the moment something inside me snapped. I confronted Ethan the next morning, cornering him in the parking lot of the local gym. He looked surprised to see me standing there, fists clenched at my sides. Without preamble, I asked him what he meant by telling Tara they were married in a previous life. At first, he tried to laugh it off as a joke, but my glare made it clear I wasn't buying it. He sighed, eyes flicking around to ensure no one else was listening, and confessed that he'd felt a connection with Tara ever since my wedding. He had read some books on reincarnation and became convinced they'd been lovers in multiple timelines. My stomach roiled with anger and betrayal. I told him to stay away from my wife, but he countered that he only wanted to protect her happiness. That was enough to make me snap. I grabbed his shirt, pushing him against a car, hissing that he was the one destroying our happiness. He just stared at me with wounded eyes, as though I were the aggressor. I wanted to pound him into the pavement, but a part of me craved something more thorough than violence, something that would end his meddling forever. That evening, I confronted Tara again, showing her screenshots of their bizarre conversations. She didn't cry or beg forgiveness. Instead, she got angry at me for snooping. I demanded to know if anything physical had happened. She rolled her eyes, calling me paranoid and controlling. When I pressed further, she stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind her. I was left alone, seething with rage and confusion. My marriage was crumbling before my eyes, and the person who should be fighting beside me was instead racing into the arms of the man who claimed to be her soulmate across centuries. I spent a sleepless night drowning in thoughts of betrayal. By morning, I'd made up my mind. I needed to take action, not just mope around, hoping this phase would pass. Tara came home the next afternoon, looking disheveled and refusing to tell me where she'd been. I knew I couldn't keep playing the fool. Something had to give. With trembling resolve, I called up a private investigator I'd once hired for a work-related matter. If there was more to this story, hidden meetings, love letters, anything, I would find it. And then I would make them pay, for sure. The investigator's name was Denise. She was a sharp-eyed woman who had an aura of calm authority. When I explained my situation, I expected judgment, or at least pity, but she simply nodded and laid out her terms. Within days, she provided me with photographic evidence that Tara and Ethan were meeting at a cheap motel off the highway. My stomach twisted as I viewed the grainy pictures. Ethan's car in the lot, Tara slipping inside at odd hours, sometimes staying for less than an hour. Denise also managed to obtain text logs, more references to past lives, cosmic alignments, a bond that spanned centuries. The language was simultaneously grandiose and nauseating. I felt a surge of hatred. It wasn't just the physical betrayal, it was the utter disregard for our marriage, our shared history. This was bigger than hurt feelings now. It was a matter of my pride and self-worth. Tara tried to play the role of the wounded spouse in public, telling mutual friends I'd become controlling and paranoid. She didn't know I had proof. The time for confrontation was nearing, and I knew I wouldn't walk away quietly. My patience for her lies and Ethan's fantasies was gone. I decided I wouldn't confront them with a simple argument or a dramatic speech. That would only feed their narrative that I was the irrational, jealous husband. Instead, I devised a plan that would expose their duplicity in front of the very people whose respect I valued, our close friends, colleagues, and neighbors. Tara had arranged a small gathering at our house the following weekend, supposedly to celebrate her recent promotion. I knew Ethan would attend, of course. I spent the week preparing, transferring the evidence to a neatly edited slideshow, timestamps, motel receipts, screenshots of their texts referencing cosmic marriages. If they wanted to talk about past lives, I'd ground them in the harsh reality of this one. When the night finally arrived, I greeted guests with forced cheer. Tara acted as if everything were normal, making small talk, offering appetizers. Ethan arrived late, wearing a smug look that suggested he believed I didn't suspect a thing. Throughout the evening, I maintained my composure, smiling politely while adrenaline surged through my veins. Exactly nobody sensed the storm brewing beneath my calm facade. In a few hours, they would witness the truth, and I would unleash the reckoning I'd carefully orchestrated. Around 10 o'clock, I dimmed the lights and tapped a spoon against my glass, calling for everyone's attention. Tara looked at me with confusion, and Ethan's gaze darted around nervously. I cleared my throat, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my temples. I thanked everyone for coming to celebrate Tara's promotion, acknowledging her hard work. Then, with a calmness I didn't know I possessed, I said I had one more thing to share, a personal project I'd been working on. The TV screen behind me lit up, revealing the first motel receipt with Tara's name. Murmurs rustled through the room. The subsequent slides displayed timestamps, photos, texts, evidence that told a chilling story of betrayal. I watched faces shift from confusion to horror. Tara rushed toward me, attempting to yank the USB drive from the laptop, but I stepped aside. Ethan stood frozen, a flush creeping up his neck. The room erupted into gasps and whispers, some guests instinctively backing away from the guilty parties. I continued, my voice steady as I laid out every detail. No one could doubt the truth now. The final slide read, "This is how they repaid my trust." And then, utter silence. In that suffocating hush, Tara tried to salvage her pride, claiming I'd misunderstood everything. She attempted to spin the story as if she were somehow trapped by Ethan's fantasies, but the text told a different tale. Several guests turned away in disbelief or disgust. One of our neighbors, a kindly older woman, even approached me to ask if I was all right. I just nodded numbly. Then Ethan found his voice, blurting out something about destiny and how Tara belonged with him across lifetimes. That's when I lost my composure. I demanded to know how he could justify wrecking our marriage for some fever dream of reincarnation. He started babbling about universal bonds and karmic debts, as though any of that absolved him of wrongdoing. I could almost feel the friendship we once shared disintegrating in the air around us. Tara, in tears, insisted she'd never intended to hurt me, but her words rang hollow. She lunged for my arm, begging for a private conversation, but I shook her off. This was beyond private now. Everyone had witnessed the devastation. I stood there, letting the weight of their betrayal crush any lingering illusions. Revenge no longer felt optional. It was vital. I kicked Ethan out of my house that night, warning him never to set foot on my property again. As for Tara, she packed a bag, sobbing as she left. I felt no pity. The next few weeks were a blur of legal paperwork, financial disentanglement, and awkward conversations with friends who realized the gravity of what had happened. Tara texted me incessantly, alternating between tearful apologies and venomous accusations that I'd ruined her life. Ethan tried to call too, leaving voicemail after voicemail about how I was interfering with their cosmic fate. I ignored them both. My lawyer guided me through the divorce process, and I insisted on terms that left Tara with far less than she expected. I no longer felt any obligation to be fair. Meanwhile, word of the scandal spread like wildfire. Our social circle fractured, with some taking sides, others trying to stay neutral. It didn't matter to me. I was done playing the victim. Behind the scenes, I gathered more evidence, ensuring that neither Tara nor Ethan could spin a false narrative. If they wanted to talk about karmic destiny, they could do it with empty pockets and public shame. That was my plan. In the end, the divorce was finalized more quickly than I expected, largely thanks to the mountain of evidence I had. Tara ended up moving in with a friend, maybe even Ethan. I didn't bother to check. Our shared bank accounts were closed, assets divided with brutal efficiency. The humiliation she endured was public. She lost some friendships and found that the romantic fantasy she'd nurtured with Ethan didn't offer much comfort when faced with practical realities. As for Ethan, he seemed to vanish from my life as quickly as he'd blown it up. He quit his job without notice and left town, at least according to mutual acquaintances. A few months later, I heard rumors that he and Tara had broken things off. Perhaps the weight of reality had finally crushed their reincarnation dreams. While part of me felt vindicated, I just felt numb. My life had become unrecognizable, a cascade of revelations, legal proceedings, and shattered trust. But I'd made one thing clear: I would not be the fool they left in the dark. Revenge was bittersweet, but necessary. I sold the house we'd once shared and moved into a smaller place, a symbol of my willingness to start anew. It's been a year since that explosive night of revelations. I've learned that betrayal cuts deeper than almost anything else, but I've also discovered a core of resilience within myself. I refuse to see myself as a victim. Instead, I view it all as a twisted lesson on the fragility of trust. I no longer lie awake wondering if I should have tried harder to keep Tara. She made her choices. Ethan made his. And I made mine. I chose not to forgive. I chose to extract my own brand of justice, laying bare their secrets for everyone to see. Some might call it petty. I call it self-respect. My new place is modest but comfortable. I've reconnected with old friends, made new ones who know nothing of the chaos I endured. I'm not yet ready to date again, but I'm open to the possibility someday. Until then, I focus on rebuilding my life brick by brick, forging something stronger than what was broken. If there's a moral to this story, it's that certain lines, once crossed, can never be uncrossed. For me, that line was betrayal, and for Tara and Ethan, forgiveness was never on the table, not ever.